Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another deep dive? We only pick the most fascinating cases, and trust me, this one is a real head-scratcher.
Definitely a case that stays with you.
Today, we're heading to Tempe, Arizona, back to 1997. We're diving into the unsolved murder of Fiona Yu, a young student found murdered in her off-campus apartment.
A case that still has so many unanswered questions, even after all these years.
And it reminds you that these kinds of things can happen anywhere, even in seemingly ordinary places. We're basing our deep dive today on a true crime podcast episode that does a great job of laying out the facts and exploring some potential leads.
Yeah, it's a really well-researched episode.
Now, we're not trying to solve the case ourselves, but we are going to unpack the complexities, see what insights we can gather, and hopefully you'll walk away with some new perspectives on the case. So, Fiona Yu, 1997, Tempe, Arizona. Where do we even begin with a case like this?
Well, I think the timeline is a good place to start, and it's surprisingly tight, which adds to the mystery.
Yeah, let's talk timeline.
So it's August 4th, 1997. Fiona, she's a student at ASU, finishes her work-study shift at the library around 5:10 p.m. and bikes back to her apartment.
Okay, seems pretty normal so far.
Her roommate, Kazuito, gets home a little later, sees Fiona's bike and backpack outside, but doesn't see Fiona right away. But, their apartment has 2 levels, so she doesn't think much of it at first.
Yeah, you figure maybe Fiona's upstairs or out grabbing the mail or something.
Exactly. But then around 6 p.m., Kazuito starts getting this uneasy feeling. So she goes upstairs to check on Fiona, and that's when she makes the horrifying discovery.
That feeling she described, almost like a sixth sense, that always sends chills down my spine. Makes you wonder if the attacker was still in the apartment at that moment.
It's definitely possible.
And when you look at the time frame, it gets even more intriguing. Witnesses saw Fiona biking home around 4:30 p.m., and by 5:05, she's back from the mailbox. Kazuito gets home around 5:20.
So that means the attacker had, at most, a 15-minute window to commit the crime.
15 minutes. That's such a small window of opportunity. It makes you wonder, did the killer know Fiona's routine so well that they could plan the attack down to the minute? Or were they watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike?
Those are the key questions investigators are trying to answer. It definitely casts doubt on that initial theory of a random burglary gone wrong, especially when you consider there were no signs of forced entry.
Wait, no forced entry?
Nope, none.
Okay, so now we're thinking, did Fiona know her attacker? Would she have opened her door to someone who meant her harm?
It's a possibility, right? I mean, you don't just open your door to anyone. So naturally, suspicion fell on Fiona's long-term boyfriend, Mark. They had recently broken up, so you have the classic motive there, maybe a jealous ex-lover. But he had a solid alibi. He was with family in New York at the time.
So alibi checks out. But I'm guessing this is where the profiler comes in.
Exactly. The police brought in a profiler, and he had some interesting insights. He believed that the attacker likely knew Fiona's routine, maybe had been watching her for some time.
So not just a crime of passion, but something more planned and calculated.
That's what the profiler seemed to think. He even suggested that the killer might have slipped in while Fiona was briefly outside getting the mail, taking advantage of that tiny window of opportunity.
Wow, so the investigation widens. I'm guessing the police start looking at friends, acquaintances, anyone in Fiona's circle who might have had a motive or the opportunity?
Absolutely. They start collecting DNA samples, but everyone they test is cleared. Dead end.
A dead end. So what happens next? If it wasn't someone Fiona knew, was it a random attack?
Well, that's a chilling thought. And it becomes even more relevant when just weeks later there are 2 other attacks on young women near the ASU campus. Both victims were strangled and beaten, similar to Fiona's case.
Hold on, 2 other attacks. So close in time and with similar MOs.
Yep. It's a huge development and really raises the stakes of the investigation.
Okay, so now investigators have to consider, are these attacks connected? Could the same person be responsible for all 3?
It's the question that's looming over everything. The similarities in the attacks, the brutality, the fact that they all targeted young women, it's hard to ignore. And thankfully, there was a break in the case of those September attacks. The police arrested 2 high school students, Lee Comeyer Jr. and Derek Wood.
High school students? How did they catch them?
It was a combination of things, witness descriptions, and some evidence found at their homes.
Okay, so you'd think that would be the end of it, right? Case closed. But it wasn't, was it?
Not quite. Their DNA didn't match the sample from Fiona's case.
Wait, their DNA didn't match? But they were arrested for the other attacks with similar MOs. Could this be a case of mistaken identity? Or did they have an accomplice we don't know about?
It's a huge question mark. The police didn't completely rule out Lee and Derek, even with the DNA discrepancy, so we're left with this unsettling possibility that there might be someone else out there who is involved.
Wow, so many layers to this already. And then to make things even more complicated, in 1998, a new figure emerges. Thomas Floyd Phelps. Who was this guy?
Phelps was a stalker. He specifically targeted Asian women near the ASU campus, trying to force them into his car, claiming he had a gun. His MO was pretty terrifying.
And this was happening around the same time as Fiona's murder. Was he ever considered a suspect in her case?
He was never officially linked, but the details are disturbingly similar. It definitely raises questions about whether he could have been involved, or even if there were other unsolved cases connected to him that we just don't know about.
This is where things start to feel really unsettling. It's not just one potential predator, but multiple individuals operating in the same area, potentially targeting similar victims. It makes you wonder how many other cases might be out there, hidden in the shadows.
It's a sobering thought, and it makes you think about the limitations of investigations, especially back then. Were there missed connections? Overlooked evidence? How many families are still waiting for answers?
Those are some heavy questions. But before we get too lost in the darkness, let's revisit one more piece of the puzzle that emerged in 2017. That phenotype snapshot of Fiona's suspected killer created using DNA analysis.
Yeah, that was a big development.
It depicted a Hispanic male, but no matches were ever publicly announced.
Right. But even without a match, it was a huge step forward. For the first time, we had a visual representation of the potential perpetrator, generated directly from the DNA evidence.
It's amazing how far forensic science has come. But hold on, because the article about the snapshot drops another bombshell. It mentions that the snapshot matches a similar description given during another sexual assault that occurred close to Fiona's murder.
That statement throws a wrench in everything. We have this potential connection between Fiona's case and another assault, but no details. What was this other assault? Could it be the key to unlocking Fiona's case? We'll have to dig deeper to find out.
Sounds like we have a lot more to uncover.
That cryptic clue, a possible link to another unnamed assault. It's like we're on a scavenger hunt, but we're missing half the clues.
Right, and it's driving me crazy. What could this other assault be? The only other unsolved sexual assault we know of from around that time, with a description that might match, is the attack on a jogger in Tucson in late July 1997. Just days before Fiona's murder.
Okay, let's break this Tucson case down. A woman in her late 30s, she's out jogging when a teenager on a bike stops her, starts talking to her, but then things escalate and he attacks her.
That's terrifying. Broad daylight, you think you're safe out for a jog?
Right, but thankfully she fought back. She hits him with a rock and he takes off.
Wow, good for her. So what happened next?
The police released a sketch, described the attacker as a Hispanic male, about 5'3", very short black hair, riding a silver lowrider bike.
Okay, so could this be the assault the article mentions? The timing lines up. It happened just days before Fiona's murder, and the description, the suspect's ethnicity, it all seems to fit with the phenotype snapshot.
It's definitely possible.
But hold on. There are some things that don't quite add up. The Tucson attacker was on a bike, and there's no mention of a bicycle being at Fiona's apartment. Plus, Tucson is over an hour and a half away from Tempe. Not exactly close proximity.
You're right to be skeptical. The lack of a bike at the scene and the distance between the cities do raise some doubts. But we have to remember, we're working with limited information here. There might be details about both cases that haven't been made public.
That's true. Maybe the attacker had a car, or someone drove him to Tempe. Anything is possible. But what I find really interesting is that the Tucson case had a DNA sample, from the blood on the victim after she fought back.
Right, and that DNA evidence could be crucial if it was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database. They could compare it directly to the sample from Fiona's case. A match would be a huge breakthrough.
So why hasn't that been done? If they have both samples, it seems like the most obvious next step.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? There could be a few reasons. Maybe the Tucson sample never made it into CODIS. There can be backlogs, Or maybe investigators saw enough differences between the cases that they ruled out a connection without doing a direct DNA comparison.
That's so frustrating to have this potentially crucial piece of evidence just sitting there. It really highlights how even a seemingly small detail, like comparing two DNA samples, could be the key to solving a case.
Speaking of new tools and techniques, what about genetic genealogy? That's been a game changer in so many cold cases lately. Could it help here?
It's definitely a possibility. If the DNA from Fiona's case is good enough quality, they could potentially identify distant relatives of the perpetrator. And that would be a major lead.
And remember, they were able to create that phenotype snapshot from the DNA, which suggests it's viable for genetic genealogy. The question is, has anyone tried this yet? Our sources don't say.
Another frustrating silence. Genetic genealogy has been so successful in recent years, it feels like the next logical step. It could finally give Fiona's family some answers. So many open questions, these loose threads. It makes you think, has the case gone cold again? Or are there things happening behind the scenes that we just don't know about?
That's the reality with cold cases, unfortunately. They're full of starts and stops. It's easy to get caught up in all the twists and turns, but at the heart of it, there's a real person, a life tragically cut short. And the pursuit of justice for Fiona, it should never truly end.
You're absolutely right. And it brings us back to that puzzling statement about another assault possibly connected to Fiona's case. Could finding out more about that other attack be the key to finally solving this mystery?
It's worth exploring. Maybe there's something unique about that assault, a piece of evidence, a witness statement, anything that could connect it to Fiona's case in a way investigators didn't initially see.
Right. It might be a long shot, but sometimes those long shots pay off. And you never know. Someone listening right now might have a piece of the puzzle. Maybe they lived in the area back then, knew Fiona, or one of the potential suspects. Even something they think is insignificant could be important.
It happens more often than you think. People come forward with information, they think it's irrelevant, and it turns out to be the missing piece. Like crowdsourcing justice.
That's what's so fascinating about true crime. We can all be a part of the process. Using our collective knowledge to try and solve these mysteries, you never know what small detail might make a difference.
Exactly. So if this deep dive has triggered a memory, sparked an idea, don't hesitate to contact the authorities. You could be the one to help bring closure to Fiona's case.
It's incredible to think that someone out there might hold the key to solving this mystery. But even if we never get all the answers, it's important to keep asking the questions, keep Fiona's memory alive, and never give up on the pursuit of justice.
Could have said it better myself. Fiona's case is a stark reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, hope and perseverance can pave the way for truth and accountability.
Fiona's case has really stuck with me, all these twists and turns, and we're still left with so many questions. It makes you realize just how complex these investigations can be.
It does. Even with all the advancements we have in forensics, sometimes the answers remain elusive.
You know, what gets to me is how Fiona's story isn't unique. There are so many crimes, especially those against women, that go unsolved.
Yeah, sad reality.
It's a reminder of how much work we still need to do to ensure justice for victims and hold those responsible accountable.
Absolutely. But there are glimmers of hope, too. Advancements in forensic science, especially genetic genealogy, have been revolutionizing cold case investigations.
It's amazing how technology can breathe new life into these cases, right? Giving hope to families who've been searching for answers for years, like a light in the darkness.
Exactly. And it's not just technology. Public awareness is also playing a huge role.
You mean podcasts like this?
Well, yes. Podcasts, true crime documentaries, online communities dedicated to unsolved mysteries. All of this helps keep these cases in the public eye.
Right. It generates conversations and maybe even unearths new leads.
It's the power of collective knowledge. The idea that someone out there might have a piece of the puzzle, even if they don't realize it.
And sometimes that one piece is all it takes to crack the case wide open.
It really shows that we can all be part of the solution.
So as we wrap up our deep dives into Fiona Yu's case, what are the key takeaways? It's a story that's both fascinating and heartbreaking, full of dead ends, potential breakthroughs, and unanswered questions.
It certainly makes you think about the limitations of what we can know, even with all the tools and resources at our disposal.
And for me, it underscores the need for continued vigilance, awareness in our communities, and unwavering advocacy for safety and justice. Fiona's story is a reminder that even in seemingly safe environments, darkness can lurk. We have to be committed to protecting each other and seeking the truth, no matter how difficult the path may be.
Well said. And as we conclude this deep dive, let's not forget the potential impact it might have.
You mean someone listening right now might hold the key to solving this mystery?
Exactly. It could be a long-forgotten memory, a photograph tucked away in a box, or a document hidden in a drawer. If this deep dive has stirred something within you, no matter how insignificant it may seem, don't dismiss it. Reach out to the authorities. Your contribution, however small, could be the missing piece that brings justice for Fiona and peace to her memory.
What a powerful thought to leave our listeners with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unsolved case of Fiona Yu. We may never have all the answers, but the pursuit of truth and justice must continue. And who knows, maybe someone out there listening holds the key to unlocking this mystery.